out about the groupie?
Yes. Somebody snitched. And went straight to daddy.
Well, I guess he had mine. There were minders.
Still minders,
okay.
yeah. So, apparently, Albert wrote, quote, to thrust yourselves into the hands of one of the most abject of the human species, to be by her initiated in the sacred mysteries of creation, which ought to remain shrouded in holy awe until touched by pure and undefiled hands.
Shut up.
Yeah, he would have made great addition to the 1990s purity movement. Anywho, unfortunately for Albert, he didn't know that Bertie was actually getting busy with not just Nellie, but also another woman who the only thing we know about her was that her last name was Green and that she was married.
Oh.
And hubby was pimping her out, apparently.
Okay.
She was the one
so the husband knew that she was... Okay.
Yeah. So she was the one that was smuggled into Windsor for his 20th birthday party.
Ooh.
So this woman and her husband had to be quietly bribed and sent packing to New Zealand in order to keep them.
That's a long, long way.
It is a long way.
Did they really have to go that far?
I guess they wanted to make sure they really were out of the way. Because he had to wed a Danish princess, all right? So in November of 1861, Albert's still very upset with Bertie, and so he visits him at Cambridge, and they go and take this long walk and have a chat. Mm-hmm. No one really knows what was said between them, but Albert apparently...
There were no minders around.
Right, there were not any minders. Albert apparently did forgive his son's transgressions. We think this was because he was feeling like he was about to die.
Oh.
And...
He's not that old, though, right?
Yeah, he's only like 40. And he did, indeed.
I guess that's old. That's old.
True. He did die 3 weeks later.
Oh, well, he knew then.
Yeah. Apparently he had some vicious diarrhea from several weeks, so it was like something was up. The doctors thought it was typhoid, but the current thought is that it was probably Crohn's disease because he had suffered from stomach issues
really sad.
all his life. So Victoria was only 38, and she was devastated, even though they'd had a very volatile relationship. Right. She was in love with him. Oh. She blamed Bertie for his father's death. She wrote, quote, I never can or shall look at him without a shudder. Bertie was grieved as well, but he was always really good about containing his emotions. I think that might have been why people thought he was dumb, because he wasn't very emotive. So Victoria starts making a living as a professional widow. She basically just withdraws from public life altogether. And so Bertie kind of has to step up and sort of take over things.
And she just wears black all the time, right?
Right, for the rest of her life.
And all the portraits of her as an older
always
lady.
In black. I think she might have once worn white, but white was also considered a color of mourning. Yeah, right. Particularly in the French culture. So Bertie steps up. He starts doing a lot of traveling on behalf of the country. And then in 1862, he marries Princess Alexandra. Okay. They move into Marlborough House in London. But despite living in a completely different house, Queen Victoria still manages to wheedle her way into their life.
She's a helicopter parent?
She is a helicopter parent. She has like a bunch of spies, and they would report back to her frequently about what was going on in the house. And
she has nothing better to do.
Yeah, exactly. She'd have doctors visit them.
She should find a hobby. A different hobby.
Like being queen?
Something like that.
Yeah. So
frolicking in the countryside.
Yeah. With strapping Scottish servants.
With people that look like Leopold.
Yeah. So she worried incessantly about Alex's health and ability to bear children. She had
the wife.
Yeah. Right. Sorry. Alexandra. And her ability to bear children.
She had no basis for that.
No.
Okay.
She had doctors report on Alex's menstrual cycles.
Yeah.
I know, right? She randomly...
Pretty intrusive.
Yeah, I know. And she randomly wrote to her daughter, Vicky, quote, are you aware that Alex has the smallest head you've ever seen? I dread that. With Bertie's small, empty brain... Very much for his future children.
Was Vicky like eye rolling all over the place?
She probably was.
Mother. Oh, we got another letter from Mother.
Actually, I think whenever
Alex's head size.
Even though Vicky and Bertie didn't get along as children, they kind of backed each other up as adults. And so when Victoria would write these horrible letters about him, Vicky never really would respond. So
that's funny.
She was a smart girl.
Right.
So fortunately, Alexandra would give birth to their first child, who was a boy.
Good.
His name was Albert Victor.
So she could have children, even though she had a small head.
Yes. And was flat-chested. That was noted as well.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah, because she was so flat-chested, Victoria quoted once that was unnatural.
Thanks for noticing.
Yeah. Albert Victor was born in January of 1864. So he was actually born premature. He only weighed 3 3/4 pounds.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Amazing that he survived.
It was amazing.
They would go on to have an additional 5 children.
Okay.
So 6 children in total. So they definitely, they did their duty. It was generally acknowledged that Bertie and Alex had a great affection for each other, particularly after the birth of their first child. Victoria's meddling brought them together, and they did seem to have a few things in common. Mm-hmm. They liked to hunt, and they were very social people.
She hunted?
Yeah, she was. Victoria hated that Alexandra was
That's funny.
Hunting a lot. Interestingly enough, Alexandra was raised in a very poor court. They apparently had to sew their own clothing.
But she was a princess.
Right. Even though she was a princess, they were very impoverished. So she became a princess, but I don't know if she really was a princess. Her father was the heir to the Danish throne.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure how he got there, but as a result, they didn't have a lot of money.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So she was very frugal as a result. And I think she was really down to earth, which helped Bertie.
Yeah.
And he appreciated that. But as the kids came, Alex's interest shifted to the nursery, and Bertie kind of started resenting her for not paying attention to him.
For being a mom to his children.
Right. I won't say that he was completely devoted to Alex in the early years of their marriage, but it's by 1867 his eye began to wander. Yeah. On a visit to St. Petersburg that February, there were many reports of outrageous flirtations with Russian court ladies.
Well, those are also reports, and people like sensationalism.
That's true.
Well, I'm sure there was something, but
this is true as well.
People like
scandal! So between Alex's divided attentions and Victoria's refusal to assign Bertie any meaningful work, he decided to find entertainment elsewhere. So it's hard to trace who he was sleeping with at specific times, but we do have a general idea of what he was up to, because he liked to write letters, and a lot of letters.
Oh.
Sometimes to his detriment. By the late 1860s.
Graphic letters?
Possibly. Some he did write graphic letters, and then some were just kind of funny gossipy letters.
To?
His mistresses.
Oh, right. Okay. I thought maybe he was writing to his family or siblings about
no.
Experiences.
A lot of his letters to his mistresses got saved.
Oh,
yeah.
So like love letters.
Yeah, sort of. I'll read one in a minute.
Okay.
Bertie and Alex were the king and queen of society, if not of the country. They were instantly popular with young aristocrats. They entertained lavishly, which of course pissed Victoria off. These hangers-on would become known as the Marlborough House set.
Groupies.
Yes.
More groupies.
And they were known as being fast.
Oh.
Which was the Victorian word for scandalous. They set the fashions, and a nod from Bertie meant you were golden. So it was like everybody wanted their approbation. Bertie's popularity did not make him immune to scandal, and in 1868, it became very clear. So it all started with a young woman named Lady Harriet Mordaunt. She was the daughter of a Scottish baronet and was very pretty.
What's a baronet? That's not a baron.
No, barons are actually ahead of a baronet. It's bizarre. The baronet was the very bottom of the aristocracy ladder.
Okay.
A lot of times they were more known for their money as opposed to their power. That's a sir. So when you see a sir so-and-so, he's a baronet.
Oh.
And a lot of them were politicians, as they would. So she was raised in Scotland, and as early as the age of 17, she met Bertie at a house party at his estate at Sandringham.
Wait, there's a Duke of Sandringham in Outlander?
Yeah.
Is that the same?
No, Sandringham is not an actual, it's just a house, an estate. So it didn't actually have a title attached to it.
Okay.
She just pulled that out of thin air. So they met at Sandringham. They exchanged photographs, and then they actually began corresponding to each other, even though she's unmarried and he's married. Mm-hmm. So their letters...
And his wife's taking care of his kids.
Right. Mm-hmm. Their letters, though, were pretty boring. In May of 1867.
It's very disappointing.
I know, right? He writes, quote, "My dear Lady Mordaunt, many thanks for your letter. And I'm very
like dear hot stuff or no little pet name or
no. I don't know. This was after she was married. She married Sir Charles Mordaunt.
Oh, okay.
So they married in
so when they met, she was not married,
right?
But so he was still writing to her,
right? And so when they got married in 1866, I think she married Sir Charles Mordaunt, so she became Lady Harriet, and so that's why he's addressing her as Lady Mordaunt. Many thanks for your letter, and I'm very sorry that I should have given you so much trouble looking for the lady's umbrella for me at Paris. I am very glad to hear that you enjoyed your stay there. I shall be going on Friday next, and the princess is so much better, shall hope to remain a week there. He goes on to say that he is sorry to not have the chance to call upon her before he leaves, and that he hoped to do so at a later time and meet her husband.
Well, that's very polite of him.
Yes.
So these people were lovers at some point?
Well, so...
Or is that just...
Harriet had always raised eyebrows. The fact that she was allowed to correspond with a married man in the first place was pretty scandalous.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Before Sir Charles married her, Harriet's brother-in-law actually took him aside and told him that this was going on.
Okay, so he knew what he was getting into.
Yeah. Harriet was also prone to hysterics.
They said that of all women.
I know, right? She was fond of running up to young men that she didn't know and passionately embracing them.
That's what I do.
Totally? Doesn't everybody do that?
Totally normal.
Right. Things might have not been, I don't know, all right up there.
What are you saying about me?
You're not right because you passionately embrace men on the street. Men were either freaked out or charmed by this, depending on who the men were. So,
all right.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I get that.
Soon after her marriage, the servants began logging her strange behaviors.
The servants.
Always the servants.
That's funny.
You can't trust the servants.
No.
But then the prince started visiting Harriet. Once or twice a week, when her husband was away from home, he would arrive at her house in London around 4 o'clock.
Yeah, he did.
He was admitted to see Lady Harriet, who instructed her butler to admit no one else. And apparently the afternoons were an accepted time to conduct affairs.
Oh.
It was like...
I like that there's a plan.
You're right, yeah. But no one ever witnessed what happened between them, but they were quite alone.
Okay. Somebody heard it, though, probably.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Nothing was reported, but, you know they were listening at keyholes.
Yeah.
So in June of 1868, Sir Charles decided to take a fishing trip to Norway. Harriet wishes him good luck, and off he goes.
Bye.
While he was gone, Lady Harriet begins seeing a friend named Lord Cole. One night, he dined with Harriet and stayed until 1 a.m., long after the guest had departed. And so the gossip really began. And we're going to pause there for this week. Cliffhanger! Sorry.
Well, you're really leaving me and everyone else hanging.
Yeah, I know. Join me next week as we finish up the story with Harriet, and then we'll also explore some of Bertie's later scandalous women that he's involved with, including a woman who was known as Babbling Brook. So you can imagine what kind of stuff got said there. So until then, ta-ta for now.
Good night.